Hey everyone, this is Matt with Converge, and today we want to carry on our discussion on sketch blocks by talking about how to take a complex model and create a sketch block from it. Now so far, if you followed along, we've talked about the basic creation and usage of blocks, then we got into belts and pulleys, gears, linkages, and then we just ended with part motion using Instant3D in a part file. From here, the next step is to take this complicated Ducati 2-valve motor, and we're going to create a drawing view from it. So if you guys want to follow along, just go ahead and open that Parasolid file that's provided, and then you want to make sure that you save it as an assembly. From here, we're going to create a new detailed drawing, and in this case, the sheet format that I use doesn't really matter. I'm just going to stick with the default ANSI landscape file, and then once I open this, I'm going to start placing a view. Now you'll notice that the orientation of this motor is not correct, and again, that's something that you have to deal with from time to time. So I'm going to just place a view so that I can see the left-hand side of this motor, and then we're going to work with it from here. Now you'll notice if you start selecting a view, you can get a couple faces, you can pick up on stuff, but it's not like working with it in a sketch in a part file. You can't simply just right-click and convert it to a sketch. So what we do is we left-click on the drawing view inside of our tree, then we're going to right-click, and there's an option to convert view to sketch. This actually gives us three different options. We can simply replace it with a sketch, we can replace the view with a block, or we can insert it as a block. I like to use this option because it creates a new block based off of this view rather than replacing what we have there. Now in this case, we're not actually keeping the detailed drawing, so it doesn't really matter, but in some cases you want to keep what you have there. So rather than replacing it, I like to just insert it as a new block. Once you say OK, it goes through the process and it converts it to a block. It gives you some options about what layer to stick it on, if we have any leaders, if we want to rotate it. So this is actually a great time for us now to come in and rotate this 270 degrees. And you can see that positions it correctly. Now we can also do that by selecting the view and rotating it first, or fixing it back in the part or assembly file. But we do have these options when we're inserting the blocks to deal with that. Once I've placed one of my views, I'm going to hit the OK or the green check mark, and now I have a block in this file. The next thing that I want to do is I want to save this externally. So we'll go to Tools, Blocks, and you'll notice that the Save option isn't here. The way to handle this is by selecting it. So if we select the drawing view, you'll notice that the view is placed here and it doesn't contain the sketch block. If we select the sheet, the sketch block doesn't come up, and if we select the top, it doesn't come up either. But if we box select this, you'll notice that it's listed as block 1. So once it's selected, I'm going to go to Tools, Blocks, and now I have the Save option. So I want to make sure that I save this out, and you notice that I already have one called Ducati 2-valve engine block, so I'll just name it something new, so that way we can just call it in this case we'll call it Ducati engine, and that way we can see how this process works. Next, I'm going to create a new part file. I could insert it back in the assembly file or one of the other part files, but ultimately you still have that heavy assembly or that heavy part to deal with, so I'm going to start a new one. I'm going to start a sketch on the right plane. I'm going to go to Tools, down to Blocks, and then Insert. You'll notice that it's not open like it is if it's inside of a part file, so we have to browse for it. I'm going to go to my quick access menu and to my sample blocks, and we're going to go to Ducati engine that was just created, and then I'll have to zoom out because it is fairly large. We'll have to zoom out to see where it is. The insertion point could have been set when we created the block originally, but you'll notice that it's just kind of up here in the left hand corner. I'm going to place one of them and say OK, and now I have this block inside of a sketch. I can come through and I can pick, for example, the swing arm pivot. So if I want to take one of these points and align them to the origin, I can make those coincident. Then I can make sure that the bottom of the pan is horizontal. And now I have this constraint. It has everything I need to start designing the swing arm. I can use the upper points to mount the frame and everything here that I want. And of course we can go in, just like any sketch block, we can drill down a level and we can edit that sketch block. So if I double click on it, I'll go into editing the block, or we can right click on it and edit the block. and then we can remove stuff we don't need. For example, there are a lot of lines in here that may or may not be useful to us. We might not need to see all of the heatsink fins on each of the cylinders or some of the additional hardware. So if we want to get rid of any of that, we can just simply edit the block. We can select, we can drag them, we can move them around, we can delete them. And once we're done, we simply say OK to exit the block, and then we can OK to exit the sketch. Now what we've done is we've created this sketch in our file, our new part file, that contains a side view sketch block that gives us everything we need in terms of designing a part based on this, rather than having to deal with the assembly, maybe designing your parts in the context of an assembly. And this really keeps it a little bit cleaner at the part level. And of course, once we get to the assembly level, we can simply take this file, insert it into the assembly, and we'll know exactly where it is. One word of caution for you is make sure that everything is measured and scaled appropriately. We took the file in and it was scaled 1:1. We created a block and we brought it back. But it is important to make sure that when you get it back as a block that you scale it appropriately if you need to. So measure something off of the original, the diameter of a hole, the distance between 2 points, whatever you need to do to make sure that you have that scale right. But go ahead and try this out. Take a simple assembly or a complex assembly, bring it into a drawing, convert that view into a block and save it out. And hopefully this will save you guys a little bit of time and hopefully some hardware resources when you're designing your next complex assembly. As always, if you have any questions, please let us know. And if you have any ideas for topics or things that you want to see covered in these video series, please let us know that as well. And we're happy to cover as much information as possible as long as it's useful to everybody.